Well, coming up on today's show, Tesla rushed towards a Model 3 delivery deadline, the Renault Nissan alliance edges away from their happy marriage, and a brand new EV company wants to join the party. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening. In fact, wherever you are in the world, welcome to EV News Daily. It's Sunday, 23rd of December. My name is Martyn Lee, and I've been through every EV story I can find today to bring you only the ones that I think you need to know about. I did figure 2 days before Christmas, it'll get quiet. I'll miss a couple of shows. There's so much going on. My inbox is full. People are sending me stuff. New videos hitting the internet like the fully charged Robert Llewellyn review of the VW ID in South Africa. There's that to talk about and to recommend you watch. Thank you as well to myev.com for helping make this show. They've built the world's first marketplace for buying and selling EVs. If you are in the market for adding one to your life, or maybe you're moving onwards and upwards from an EV and you'd like to pass it on to the next lucky owner, then check out myev.com. Well, starting with Tesla, which I mentioned, Tesla production should have all of the mid-range Model 3 orders delivered by the end of the year, although it will be tight, according to Tesla CEO Elon Musk and his Twitter earlier today. Now, the company's released all cars for sale where the original customers couldn't take the delivery before the end of December. So if there was an original customer to a car, for whatever reason, they were unable to do the deal and take delivery by the end of December, or even cars that were in stock. So cars that have been used maybe for demonstrators, cars that they made multiples of a common configuration. So if the most common configuration is so-and-so colour with those wheels, with that interior, and they've got 1,000 of them to make this week. Well, look, stick 1,500 of them through the production line, have some stock, and then let's get them out to people quickly. If it's a common configuration. All of those are for sale. Everybody who wants to get their car by the end of the year, they're pedaling very fast to get the cars delivered. And remember as well, to get the $7,500 federal tax credit, you have to have taken ownership of your Model 3. It does have to, the title has to be transferred. You can't just have placed your order and put in your deposit or your extra $2,500, whatever, that when you go through the configurator, you actually have to have the car. It is yours to get that $7,500 federal tax credit if it applies to you, if you earn enough to be coming off of next year's tax bill. So you still pay the full amount for the car, of course, unlike here in the UK, where the government chip in a grant of £4,500, and that is money off the car. Well, Tesla say that they are not only working hard to get you the cars if you were guaranteed the car, but if someone's order doesn't make it in time, if someone's order, for whatever reason, happens on January the 1st, not December 31st, Tesla has said they will cover the tax credit difference if the company committed to a delivery date this year and the customer committed to make, in good faith, all efforts to receive the car this year. If for whatever reason something happens at Tesla, you get the car a day or two late and you halve, because if you're not aware, by the way, the US tax credit, the federal tax credit halves. It tapers now, 7.5 down to 3,750 for the next 6 months. Then it goes down again. Well, Tesla have said they will make up the difference. What car company even does that? And people wonder why they have raving fans. Elon tweeted this: Tesla has released all cars for sale where the original customer can't take delivery before the year end, as well as test drive and display cars, which cost less. Reminder to US buyers, the $7,500 tax credit drops in 8 days. Order online or visit stores. So maybe if there's a car somewhere, for whatever reason, that on January the 1st it would be sitting there without a buyer, maybe you want it. And then, of course, when we get to January 1st, all attention will turn to how many did they deliver in Q4. Was Q3 a fluke? My personal opinion, absolutely not. But many people will be saying, well, they can't do it again. And once we get into the new year, of course, Q1 is when the $35,000 Model 3 is meant to be on its way. My quick thoughts on that, by the way, the car itself, there's nothing really they can do to save costs on that. There's nothing really they can do. They're down to some really small percentage gains on the car. They've been making over 120,000 of the cars, by all accounts, have been sold. So they've got the making of the car minus powertrain, pretty good, and I'm sure they'll continue to iterate and improve that. Where they can make a big difference is the biggest cost of any electric vehicle, which is the battery pack. And we do know that since early last year in 2017, when they acquired a German engineering company called Ghosn, which was then renamed, as you would do if you buy a company, Tesla, Ghosn Automation, then that German company's sole mission now, that all those other contracts with the other car makers, which is what the company they bought, by the way, if you don't know, it was their job to help other car makers be better at making cars. Well, Tesla bought them, and they no longer help Mercedes and BMW in Germany to make their cars better. Everybody on the payroll at Tesla Ghosn in Germany, their sole objective now is to make Tesla a more efficient company. And with the Gigafactory, they are flying in or shipping in production lines to the Gigafactory to help the Tesla-Panasonic partnership produce more cells. Now, if you can make more cells, if you can do it more efficiently, if you can maybe even improve the chemistry along the way, then that reduces the cost of the battery pack. The biggest part of any EV is the battery. That's how they're going to get to the $35,000 Model 3. But it does require a little bit extra help from this German company they bought last year, and those lines are being worked on, installed. I don't know the time frame. I'm not privy to that information, but that's where we start to get towards a very, very affordable Model 3. It will come. There are some people, there's still some doubters who don't really understand the whole situation. They just love to go on Twitter and criticise electric cars. Well, one possible relationship which has been rosy until now, and maybe there's a few awkward conversations around the corner, is the Renault Nissan Mitsubishi alliance, really, but really Renault Nissan. And so when Nissan were on the verge of bankruptcy, on the verge of collapse, really, it was Carlos Ghosn who masterminded their turnaround, and the Japanese should indeed be very grateful to what he did. He was extraordinarily well compensated as well, by the way, which was sometimes a cause of tension in Japanese culture, how much he was paid. And then the Renault Nissan Mitsubishi alliance has led to further things like EVs, like the launch of the Renault Zoe and the Nissan Leaf. And now with their leader at the moment arguing his case in the legal battles that he will be facing over the next few months and possibly years, who knows, there's now a discussion around that alliance, and power battles are breaking out. And what does it mean for electric cars? Well, in the wake of a lengthy investigation by Nissan, executives in Asia removed Carlos Ghosn from his posts, while the European side, here in France, in Europe, they've kept him in place. Now, the French argue that you are innocent until proven otherwise. You don't just have someone arrested and then immediately they're removed from their post and other things assumed about them. So that's the French take on it, innocent until proven guilty. The shareholding agreement with this alliance, by the way, that makes the Renault Zoe, the Nissan Leaf, the shareholding agreement, it gives Renault a 43% stake in Nissan, whereas Nissan only has a 15% stake in Renault. So it's not 50-50 either way, if you know what I mean. And they don't get any voting rights over Renault anyway, as well. The agreement also stipulates that the CEO of Renault will head the alliance. And Renault, as they say about Carlos Ghosn, let's see what happens. Well, the alliance began back in 1999, long before we were talking about electric cars, and Renault was about the same size, but in much better shape financially than Nissan, on the verge of collapse. Fast forward 2 decades, we have 2 great EVs coming out of that alliance, the Zoe and the Leaf, and more to come as well. The Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid is not got the biggest battery in the world, but a very popular plug-in hybrid as well. And at the moment, Nissan is overshadowing its French partner. Twice the revenue, larger profit contribution, according to Japan Times. Nissan does rely on Renault, though, for better access to the huge European market. Don't underestimate how big that European market is for Nissan. They need Renault for that. And Renault makes engines for Nissan in somewhere called Cleons in northern France. And the Nissan-badged vans sold in the region are basically Renaults, okay, under the hood. So that alliance, which has bought us those EVs, is facing some tough times ahead, with maybe the Nissan board feeling we're okay now. We've recovered, we're fine, we've got a great lineup, we've got those SUVs and CUVs and those crossovers. We don't need Renault as much anymore, and besides, Renault have a much bigger say over Nissan than the other way around. Meanwhile, Renault is saying, let's hold station, hang on for a moment. What does it all mean for EVs? Well, the Nissan Leaf, 60 kilowatt hour, the E+, whatever we're going to call it, should have been by now well and truly out in the open and us all talking about it. They keep delaying it because they don't want the news of Carlos Ghosn to overshadow it. The latest we think is that it'll be launched at CES, first week of the new year. Let's hope they stick with the plan. Fingers crossed. And then we can find out more details about the next generation of Nissan Leaf. Still the world's biggest selling electric car. Well, a car that is sadly not going to be made anymore, which is the Chevy Volt. The GM battery facility is discharging people. Green Car Reports has bad news for those fans. And there are fans, plenty of fans out there of the Volt, a car that did a job for many people. Will the Chevrolet Volt get a successor? Green Car Reports asks, or will any other model soon carry on the potential of its Voltec plug-in hybrid system? Well, General Motors announced today that both of those possibilities are looking less likely. GM said it's going to cut 50 jobs from its Brownstown facility. That's where they assembled the battery packs for the Volt and a few other models as well, like the Buick LaCrosse and its e-assist system. So maybe it looks like with the Bolt and pure EVs are the future, at least in the immediate future. One last bit of news then, by the way, before we get into the question of the week, and that is a new company to sell EVs, the tiny Ego Mobile, E full stop or period, whatever you call it, Geo in capitals, the Ego. It's an electric car and it's a startup. They're based in Aachen in Germany, and they say delivery of its no-frills EV called the Life are going to begin by April. And then by 2022, it wants to be selling 100,000 of them every single year, says Steve Hanley for Clean Technica. Well, the little Life, as they have called it, looks like a squished-down version of the Kia Soul is how they describe it. The car has a range of between 75 and 114 miles, top speed of between 72 and 94 miles an hour, and it's going to be priced from $18,000 to $22,500 US. Well, definitely an entry-level car at an entry-level price, but plenty of people want that maybe as a second car or one to run your errands in. To keep costs down, Ego are sourcing parts off the shelf. The drivetrain is from Bosch. The tail lights were from a truck. And the founder, Gunter Schuh, tells Bloomberg he expects the new company will have positive cash flow beginning next year. It'll be profitable in 2021. And that's something that took Tesla, a decade to accomplish. Not that I'm comparing the two companies yet. Of course, I'll put a full link to Clean Technica in the show notes. Well, here we go with question of the week. These are your answers to what we were asking you. And it was actually a crowdsourced. One of our listeners suggested this question. So thank you very much for answering this. What are your specs that you want to see from an EV in 2019? Phil Roberts kicks us off. Phil is the MD of Electric Future and the premium partner of this podcast. Phil says, having driven electric for my first year, done 20,000 miles in the Leaf, it's honed my focus on what I really need in life. For me, I do regular up to 400-mile journeys a couple of times a month. And being able to complete them with short recharge stops is crucial. I think the right way to go in the long run will be smaller batteries with a good network of high-power chargers. The range, though, he needs a range of 250 when it's cold in the winter, and with fast charging as well, at least 175 kilowatts. An 80-kilowatt battery is his ideal. He doesn't mind paying up to £30,000 for an EV. 0 to 60 in 5 seconds and 110 miles an hour top speed allows for overtaking performance. Obviously, you're talking about the German autobahns where that speed would be legal, my friend. Yes, of course you are. Thank you very much to Phil for kicking us off. Hello to Marcel. Marcel Ward says his specs for an EV in 2019. Having driven the iMe, or the iMe-EV, for over 3 years, he knows you can spend little money and get a good car. So, he doesn't want much from his EV. A 75-mile winter driving range, even down to at 65 miles an hour, £7,000, and a top speed of 85, with EV acceleration is always going to suffice, he says, because you get that instant hit of torque. Well, it sounds like you're describing the small battery Renault Zoe there, which is already on the market. Alex Banahini says the range he needs is 200 miles in winter. The performance 0 to 60, anything, around 8 to 12 seconds will be nice. Cost, though, is the big one for him. Less than 15,000. He says we don't need EV hypercars that go for 600 miles and charge too fast at 350 kilowatts. What we need is affordable cars with a reasonable range. I like that one, Alex. Hello to David Allen. David also a supporter of this podcast, and we rely on so many people's generosity in order to cover the costs and spread the word about this podcast. Hi, Martin, says David. Range 3 times. This is interesting, actually. This is what David says. 3 times what people think they drive. So here's his logic, right? In polling people, he says most people drive 50-odd miles a day. So the EV needs to do 150 miles, which is adequate for daily use. The tricky part, he says, comes in long-distance travel. People want a big battery, but then you've got to pay for a big battery and lug it around all day. Performance, 0 to 60 under 8 seconds. It's anything that can beat most ICE cars. And the price, he says when the price drops under $30,000 with incentives, or $25,000 without. Thank you very much, David. Andrew Villiers says his price range is around $22,000. The range he wants is 250 miles. And the performance, again, sub 10 seconds. When you do around 10 miles a day, most people's commute is pretty short. Okay, some are longer, but many people do 10 or 20 miles a day. Because you're not making the cost savings on the fuel, is his logic. What he needs from an EV in 2019 is a cheaper price. Otherwise, you don't make the cost back. Okay, moving on to James, who is Lemon Tea Leaf on Twitter. For me, I would pick 2 cars, as I've always been a 2-car family. 180 miles from a £16,000 daily commuter car. And then what I call a 2.8 car. And listen to his logic for a 2.8 car. 280 miles, 280 brake horsepower, £28,000 would be his nice car as a treat. But he says, realistically, you're not going to get one of those for £28,000. Lars chips in. Lars Jensen, or Jensen, says 300 miles of range, but the price, just to the point where mass market is working and car makers make money, because competition will ensure constant refinement. Yeah, Lars, I mean, you and I are absolutely on the same wavelength. I've always said I want car makers to be making profitable EVs, because then they'll make more of them. A story a few weeks, maybe months ago, no, it's a few weeks ago, was an admission by Hyundai with the Kona that those that they are selling now, so in their home market, in Europe and things like that, they're not making money on, or the profit margin was so small, but at the moment they're brand building. They're getting the Kona out there. It's a great car. They're selling it as, the price they feel they can sell it for, but they're not making money on it. And I was amazed when I heard that, because I thought that they would be making some money, but I guess it's not. Scale and all those things are yet to kick in. He says what would be good, though, is a built-in app that enables others to use and pay for your car usage when you don't use it. This will enable better utilisation, and the income will make the investment easier. Hello to Paul, who emailed me this week to say the real-world range he thinks he needs is 150 miles. The price is the big one, though, and lots of people are saying this. Less than £22,000 in his case. Performance, no one's going for a big top speed so far. 100 miles an hour is all he needs. Why? Because 70 is the legal speed limit here. And 0 to 60, 10 or 11 seconds is his shout. Hello to Joel Sapp. Now, Joel says, my wish list, and this wasn't really a wish list, it was more like your realistic list, if you like, was for performance or certain specs that he would like to see. 2 things in EVs. Firstly, fossil manufacturers having EV sales leading in their segment. And the second thing he wanted, Joel in Boston, Massachusetts, for CCS 2.0, that's the the incoming protocol for CCS, by the way, backward compatible, of course, to be the standard in the US, because charging speeds can then go to 350 kilowatts, and because they've upped the amperage, CCS 1 is 200 amps limited. That means you get your 80% charge in 10 to 15 minutes. So that was his take on it, rather than the other things that people are talking about. Andrew Jacobs says, "G'day, mates. 500 Ks. Wow, you've gone big. I did ask you to be realistic, but you've gone big." He says, "Australia is a big place with cities a long way apart." And so he needs a long-range EV, 500 kilometres, 30,000 Aussie dollars. He said it'd be hard to justify anymore. 0 to 60, 5 seconds, why not? It's electric. Yes, I agree, actually. Why not? Because top speed doesn't matter so much, but that 0 to 60 speed can be increased with the changing of the gear ratio. But that 500 Ks range, man, that is big. I know it's realistic, but it's a big range. But then again, if I saw some of those spiders that you have in Australia, I would want to get as far away from those as possible as well. Hello to Bill, my friend Bill Pollock, who says, "Good evening, Martin. This is what I need in an EV in 2019. 2 to 300 kilometres range. It's got to be a 4-door hatch, shorter than 4 metres, CCS, and nice to have all-wheel drive and dual-sided charging options." I think that's a good shout. I've seen that on a few, like things like the Audi e-tron has chargers both sides. It's a good shout. I mean, it wouldn't add that much cost to a car, and certainly it would add to the utility of the vehicle. Around 30,000 Canadian dollars, he says. Hello to Jack Oakley, who chipped in with this one. Greetings from Allentown, Pennsylvania, he says. Range he needs is 200 miles and 70 miles an hour on the highway with your HVAC on. That needs to give you 200 miles. As for a price, he says, well, Golf-sized car is what he would be looking at, with a mid option. So about 28,000 US dollars, or 35 if you're going for all of the gadgets, the toys, the leather, the heated steering wheels, the Apple CarPlay and stuff. And performance, he says, 6 seconds would do him. Mild sport handling, and all those kind of things. Well, Mark Richards is after a kind of car in 2019 that the new Korean manufacturers, or the new cars from the Korean manufacturers, are coming with 300 miles. So the Kona and the e-Niro are just short of that, and the Model 3 just exceeds that. 300 miles is Mark Richards' magic number. As for performance, he says, well, I'd be interested in an EV truck at this point. He currently owns the Bolt and the Volt, so as for performance, 500 horsepower, 500 feet-pounds of torque, because he wants to beat his brother's Ford F-150 Raptor. No worries, my friend. You will do that with an EV. You will definitely do that with a Tesla truck. Well, hi to Gary. Now, Gary Clark says, my ideal EV would be an estate, along the lines of the Ford Focus, estate size. It would need to have a 200-mile minimum range, cost about £25,000, and wheel-mounted motors, he says, would be ace for allowing the space to be maximised on the inside of the vehicle for passengers. Thank you very much. I love that suggestion. It's a great idea. Hi to Charlie. Now, Charlie Fox says, for my daily commute, I need 150 miles of available range, with all of things like the air conditioning running in Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah, you do need the aircon in Phoenix. I wouldn't buy a car without active battery cooling. Well, maybe the Nissan Leaf will be off your shopping list. Actually, I need to be careful, I need to be respectful, because it does have active management of the battery. Clearly, there's no, as far as we know, from all the things about this new Leaf that's coming, no liquid thermal management, like the gold standard. But yes, it can do things. Obviously, it has a BMS, a battery management system, a BMS, which will look after the battery, and it will likely have something that can blow hot air over the battery when it's cold, and blow cold air over the battery to try and help cool it down. That's not the gold standard, but it might be enough for them to enable multiple rapid charging, and therefore, if it does the job, why would you spend more money than you have to if you can keep the cost of the car down? We don't know until it's in our hands and we start getting those YouTube videos out there of people hitting it really hard on those charge speeds. Hello to Charlie, who says, for EV to be a long-range road trip type vehicle, I'm good with 250 miles of available range. When I say available range, I'm thinking of not charging to 100% or draining to empty. Yeah, I get what you mean. So 250 miles of range, if you operate it within the 20 to 80% bandwidth, if you like, on your battery. It's a good ambition to get to. And finally, Leung in Northern California says, I need 250 miles of range for $25,000 and I'll be happy at 8 seconds or less, 0 to 60. And inside, he just wants to make sure that a tall 6'2" adult can fit comfortably. Well, thank you very much to everyone who chipped in with this week's question of the week. I really enjoyed it this week, by the way, to have a look at where your mind is, because lots of people, anyone can put a wish list together of fantasy specs, for instance, that would cost $100,000. But it's really interesting when I asked you to give me your realistic prices, realistic specs, realistic performance. That's what you came up with. Oh, that was really interesting. Thank you very much for that. Should we set a new question? All right, let's set a new question of the week. And this is an end-of-year question for you. It's a two-parter, because this week I want to ask you, along with our friends at myev.com, what's been your highlight, your EV moment of 2018? And the answer can be anything, by the way. I'm not going to be restrictive on this. Literally anything. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of... I'll kick you off. There's going to be plenty of people who say the Model 3, even though it was released last summer, 18 months ago, in limited numbers, it really hit it really hit it hard this year. So lots of people might say that. But what has been your EV standout moment of the year? It could be a personal story where you took ownership of your Model 3. Maybe you bought your very first EV. Maybe you launched an EV podcast and it did okay. Maybe that's just me on that one. So what's been your standout EV moment of the year? It can be anything and everything. I'd love to know personal stories, worldwide stories. Maybe it's the China market. Let me know. And I'm really going to look forward over Christmas and the holidays to be reading your personal stories. What's your standout EV moment? Your one thing of 2018. And then, as next week will be a day away from 2019, you can imagine part 2 of that question as we start to look forward. But for now, let's look back and tell me your highlight of 2018. There are 142 patrons of the show, and I couldn't do this without their support, their encouragement. The financial contribution enables me to not do as much freelance work, for instance, spend more time writing and researching and putting the show together in the most professional way possible, to bring you the most value, to save you the most time, so it's not an hour-long waffly podcast. Thank you very much to Phil Roberts of Electric Future. Here's our premium partner of the show and future guest in the next few days, by the way. Phil will be joining us. Hello to David, who I've mentioned earlier. David Allen is a partner of the podcast. OEM Audio of New Zealand and evpower.co.nz, another partner as well if you are in New Zealand and you need things like cables and accessories. Check out evpower.co.nz. And Sasha Pallenberg as well, a constant source of inspiration for me about how hard it is to do a startup. If you can call this podcast a startup business, but it certainly takes up more hours in the day than I've got, but it's good fun. And hello to Alan Robson, who is at Scottish EV Owner on Twitter. Our executive producers, Ashley Hill, Ariel Gear-Skalsveen, Bjarg Fuchstak, Bob Muir from gingercomputers.com in Dundee, Brian Weatherall, Cesar Trujillo, Chris Benson, Chris Hopkins, Darren Bird, David Partington, David Prescott, Damian Davis, Don McAllister. Don is from screencastsonline.com. Have a Mac product? Check out screencastsonline.com. Hello to Frederick Rovick, George Clargo, Jack Oakley, Jerry Allison, Ken Morris, Jason Fan, who's new this week, John Bailey, John H. Mayer III, John Timmis, Kevin Mason, Lars Dallager, Louis Hopkin, Luke Cully, Marcel Lohman, Marcel Ward, who we heard from, Maz Shah, Martin Croft, Matthew Ellis, Matthew Gruby, Neil E. Roberts, and the gang at Sussex EVs, Paul Stevenson, Paul Seeger-Smith, Philippe Calvet, Raj Bedwell, Renee Schneider, Rod James, Rupert Mitchell, Scott Callahan, and the Limousine Line in Sydney. There are 334 previous episodes of this show. They all live in the archive. They are for free and always will be, thanks to our Patreon fans. By the way, we're 8 patrons away from 150, which would be a magical number to get to, wouldn't it? I'd love to add your name to the list. Can we be reading your name out next? Check out patreon.com, patreon.com/EV News Daily. $10 a month, which is basically like a super posh coffee once a month can go into spreading the word about EVs, helping to convert a few more people to the way that you and I see the world. You can get all of those past episodes online for free, and if you hit the subscribe button, you get new ones first and free and automatically. In the meantime, catch up on the socials by searching EV News Daily. Do have a wonderful day. I will catch you for Christmas Eve tomorrow.